Relationships. No matter who we are, or what we do, we often find ourselves in one, or many at once. We have family, friends, work partners, spouses, lovers, and acquaintances. But whatever relationship we find ourselves in, there's bound to be misunderstandings of some sort. This is because we all have different backgrounds and ways of thinking, so, sometimes, it could result in quarrels. Most lovers' quarrels end with an apology. But for Katherine Knight, murder and mutilation were the end result. Born October 24, 1955, Katherine Knight is an Australian murderer, and the first woman in the country's history to be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. She was born and raised in an unconventional family. Her mother, Barbara, had been married to a man called Jack when she began an affair with his coworker Ken Knight. Local backlash forced Barbara and Ken to move from Aberdeen, in New South Wales Hunter Valley to Moree, in the northern part of New South Wales. Barbara and Ken had 4 children, including twin girls, Katherine Knight being one of the twins. Katherine's father was a violent alcoholic who would rape her mother up to 10 times per day. Barbara in turn often told her daughters intimate details of her sex life and how much she hated sex and men. It is believed a part of Katherine started hating men as a result of stories she heard from her mother. Katherine claimed she was frequently sexually assaulted by several members of her family, which continued until she was aged 11. Although there are doubts about the details, psychiatrists accept her claims and the events have been largely confirmed by other members of the family. Apart from her twin sister, Katherine was also close to her uncle, Oscar Knight, and was devastated when he committed suicide in 1969. The family moved back to Aberdeen the same year. In high school, Katherine was known as a bully who terrorized smaller children. Without ever learning how to read or write, she quit at the age of 15 to work at a clothing factory. A year later, she landed her dream job at a slaughterhouse, cutting up offal at the local abattoir. There, she was quickly promoted to boning and was given her own set of butcher's knives. At home, the knives were hung over her bed. According to her, this is so that they would always be in handy if she ever needed them. Katherine Knight first met co-worker David Kellett in 1973. David engaged in heavy drinking which stemmed from 2 traumatic incidents from his previous railway job in Coffs Harbour. He eventually lost the job due to deteriorating behavior and performance. Not long after, he got work at the nearby Aberdeen abattoir and became close friends with Katherine's brother. David would often get into fights at bars or wherever there was one, and Katherine was often there to help him with her fists. She was well known around town for physically threatening anyone who upsets her. At her request, they got married in 1974, a year after they met. As soon as they arrived at their service, Katherine's mother warned him to watch out, else, Katherine will kill him. She told him her daughter had a screw loose in her head and he should be very careful. But I guess they were in love, so he didn't listen. On their wedding night, Katherine tried to strangle David simply because he fell asleep after only having intercourse 3 times. Their marriage ended up being a really violent and, on one occasion, when she was heavily pregnant with their first child, Katherine burned all of David's clothing and shoes before hitting him across the back of the head with a frying pan, simply because he had arrived home late. He was treated for a severely fractured skull and police wanted to charge Katherine, but she changed her behavior to ingratiating David and talked him into dropping the charges. There were other incidents that led to Katherine being sent to psychiatric hospitals each time, but she often checked herself out after a few days claiming to be all better. One time, she left her 2-month-old infant on the local train tracks, shortly before a train was due, when she found out David was cheating on her. The couple ended up having one more daughter, and in 1984, Katherine left David and moved back to her parents' house. In 1986, shortly after her breakup with David, Katherine Knight jumped into a whirlwind romance with David Saunders, a local miner. Within a few months, Saunders moved in with her and her 2 daughters. However, he kept his apartment, and Katherine quickly became incredibly jealous and suspicious about what he did when she wasn't around. Like her previous relationships, this one quickly grew toxic and violent. At one point, she slit the throat of his 2-month-old dingo puppy in front of him just to show him what she was capable of. In June 1988, she gave birth to a 3rd daughter, Sarah, which prompted Saunders to put a deposit on a house. Katherine decorated the entire house with animal skins, skulls, horns, rusty animal traps, leather jackets, pitchforks, machetes, rakes and old boots. No space, including the ceilings, was left uncovered. David Saunders soon left her after she attempted to kill him with a pair of scissors. One would think that by this time, men would stay far away from her, but unfortunately, Katherine had a way of charming them at first, and only showed her true colors after. She then met a man named John Chillingworth in 1991. They stayed together for 3 years and had a child, Eric, Katherine's first son. While no violent incidents in their relationship have been reported, it ended after John learned she was having an affair with a man named John Price. Although starting out as an affair, the relationship between Katherine and John could be described as rosy. John was a divorcee and his 2 older kids lived with him. Well aware of Katherine's violent past, he paid no heed to warnings of friends. He worked at a local mine and made a lot of money. He took care of his kids and Katherine was comfortable. She moved in with him in 1995 and soon, she started showing her true colors. She often brought up the topic of marriage, but John Price wasn't as easy to control as David Kellett had been. He refused getting married and this made her angry. In her rage, she videotaped items he had allegedly stolen from work and sent the tape to his boss. Although the items were out-of-date medical kits that he had scavenged from the company rubbish tip, John Price was fired from the job he had held for 17 years. John was understandably angry. He kicked her out of his house, ending the relationship. A few months later, the pair got back together. A few of John's friends weren't in support of the rekindled romance, but he wasn't going to let anything stop him from being with her, not even when he lost friends. Although they were back together, John refused to let her move back in. In February of 2000, an argument between them culminated with her attempting to stab him in the chest. On the 29th of February, John took out a restraining order against her in an attempt to keep himself and his children safe. That same day, while at work, he let on that he was concerned for his safety and told his co-workers that if he ever went missing, or was found dead, it was because Katherine killed him. He was really scared and he was right to be. John arrived home to find that Katherine, although not there herself, had sent the children away for a sleepover at a friend's house. He then spent the evening with his neighbors before returning home and going to bed at 11 p.m. She later arrived at his house while he was sleeping and watched television for a few minutes before having a shower. She joined John in bed and the two had sex, after which he fell back asleep. John usually left for work very early, and a neighbor became concerned when his car was still in the driveway at 6 a.m. When he didn't arrive at work, his employer sent a worker to go check on him. When his co-worker was knocking on the door, his neighbor who had been previously concerned, came out and they both went round the house, knocking and calling his name. They knocked on his bedroom window, thinking he might have fallen into a deep sleep, but there was no reply. As they walked back to the front of the house, they noticed something on the front door they hadn't noticed before: blood. They quickly alerted the police. Police broke down the back door, and when they entered the house, they were met with a horrific scene. 44-year-old John Price was found dead on the floor. Katherine herself was found comatose after taking a large number of pills. She had stabbed him with a butcher's knife while he was sleeping. According to the blood evidence, he awoke and tried to turn on the light before attempting to escape while she chased him through the house. He managed to open the front door and get outside, but he either stumbled back inside or was dragged back into the hallway, where he finally died after bleeding out. Later, Katherine went into Aberdeen and withdrew $1,000 from John's account at an ATM. Autopsy revealed John had been stabbed 37 times, in both the front and back of his body, with many of the wounds extending into vital organs. Several hours after he had died, Katherine skinned him and hung the skin from a meat hook on the architrave of a door to the lounge room. She then decapitated him and cooked parts of his body, serving up the meat with baked potato, pumpkin, zucchini, cabbage, yellow squash, and gravy in 2 settings at the dinner table, along with notes beside each plate, each having the name of one of his children on it. She was preparing to serve his body parts to his children. She then prepared a plate for herself, though the half-discarded contents later found at the crime scene suggests that she couldn't finish her meal. John's head was found in a pot with vegetables. The pot was still warm, estimated to be at between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius, indicating that the cooking had taken place in the early morning. In a note found close to John's body, Katherine accused him of raping her daughter and his children. These accusations were found to be groundless. She was subsequently arrested. Katherine's initial offer to plead guilty to manslaughter was rejected, and she was arraigned on March 2, 2001 on the charge of murdering John Price, to which she entered a plea of not guilty. Her trial was initially fixed for July 23, 2001, but her counsel fell ill and it was adjourned and refixed for October 15, 2001. When the trial commenced, Justice Barry O'Keefe offered the 60 jury prospects the option of being excused due to the nature of the photographic evidence, which 5 accepted. The next morning, Katherine Knight changed her plea to guilty, and the jury was dismissed. It was then made public that Justice O'Keefe had been advised of the plea change the day before. He had ordered a psychiatric assessment overnight to determine if Katherine understood the consequences of a guilty plea and was fit to make such a plea. Her legal team had planned to defend her by claiming amnesia and dissociation, a claim supported by most psychiatrists, although they did consider her sane. 2 psychiatrists concluded that Knight suffered from borderline personality disorder. No reason has ever been given for the guilty plea, and despite giving it, Katherine still refused to accept responsibility for her actions. At the sentencing hearing, her lawyers requested that she be excused to avoid hearing some of the facts, but the application was refused. I mean, she committed the crime. Why does she have to be excused? When Timothy Lyons took the stand and described the skinning and decapitation, she became hysterical and had to be sedated. On November 8, 2001, Justice O'Keefe pointed out that the nature of the crime and Katherine's lack of remorse required a severe penalty. He sentenced her to life imprisonment, refused to fix a non-parole period and ordered that her papers be marked, never to be released, the first time that this had been imposed on a woman in Australian history. In June 2006, Knight appealed the life sentence, claiming that a penalty of life in prison without possibility of parole was too severe for the killing. Justices Peter McClellan, Michael Adams, and Megan Latham dismissed the appeal in the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal in September, with Justice McClellan writing in his judgment, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society." Katherine Knight took John's life without a second thought, and was even willing to feed his children his body parts. I'm glad she would remain behind bars for the rest of her life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And please, turn on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video.